Hello, everyone. We will get ready to start Photo Tips Monthly in about just under a half hour. And if you're going to watch this on the replay, remember to click on the description and get the photos, the timestamp so that you can jump to the start of the meeting. We will get ready to start Photo Tips Monthly. Just getting all of our settings set up. And if you're going to watch this on the replay, remember to click on the description. There we go. Get that all muted. Let's see. And we'll be getting started, guys. Like I said, shortly at 4 o'clock. It's about another 10 minutes or so. And again, if you're watching this on the replay, skip ahead by going to the description. There's going to be a timestamp to let you get to the beginning of the show. I should update that in the next 24 hours or so. And I'll give us our title. Let's see. I will just share my screen here so you guys can see. If you would like to, you can go log into your Fineworks, and on your dashboard, you should see your Zoom. Also have the link in there. We'll have Jim starting with us, joining us up.
Hey, Melissa.
Hey there, Jim. How you doing?
I'm good. I don't know when my video didn't start automatically, but
Yeah,
usually
I know.
does.
I had to reset some stuff. I'm hoping we keep power on here because it was flickering earlier. So I was like, oh my gosh,
Ooh,
this will happen.
dang.
Shame on it. So I'll
Right?
make sure once I get James in and stuff, and we get the intro, I'll give you host control, and then you can just go ahead and pin your video so that way on YouTube it's the whole full picture for everybody.
Okay.
Let me just get our YouTube set up on my
How you
phone.
feeling?
I'm battling. I'm just getting used to a whole bunch of new medications, so we'll see how I feel. Diabetes is just never any fun. So, and finally have hit high enough A1C where I'm officially type 2 now. So it's fun. So I'll tell anybody who, if you get high sugars, just check. It's not always being overweight or anything like that. We just have a family history of it. So
Hmm.
just they just keep going higher and higher, so we're going to try some new medications and hopefully that makes me all well and set. uh, not
I
going
see
not
your
going to the
posts
doctor.
every once in a while, so I'm
Yeah,
always concerned for you.
yeah, well, like I said, I tell everybody, like my daughter especially, I tell everybody I'm the human cockroach, nothing can kill me. So you can try. I think I've gotten last rites like 3 times in my life, and I'm like, yeah, you can keep trying, it doesn't really work. So I just keep going.
Wow.
Yeah, but
Right,
we
the
gotta.
pain and everything.
Yeah. It's a little crazy, but just keep battling.
I like
Um,
your attitude. You keep on smiling. I
yeah,
don't
you
know how
really
you do
have
it.
to. That's all you have to do. Just have a positive mindset because it's only worse if you end up feeling awful about it. It's only so much in your control, and everything else you just kind of let everything else go with it and see what happens, and that's works for me. We got a couple people joining in here, so let me see who we have because I want to make sure I got James in. Yeah, we have a few people already joining us in the waiting room, so that's good. We'll get James in here. I believe he already got us all set up on the Fineworks dashboard, so that's good. And again, guys, if y'all are joining us live on YouTube, just go ahead and use the live chat feature there, and I'll see your comments and I'll relay those over to Jim. I think you had some questions actually on the last one that are on our playlist when we did the copyright. So I'll probably have to get some answers from you on that one to put in there. That it's kind of cool. These things stay up there forever, and it can be from like 4 or 5 months back, and somebody might have a question, and I like it when I get the notice. It's like, oh, there's a question. So these will be documented on the internet, long after we're gone.
Ah, that's right.
Good there. Okay. We got about 6 minutes. And I know next month you have the magic hour coming up. So that's gonna be good. Will give us some information. I just thought I like that title. It's just so
Isn't that a good title?
yeah, that's a
I
great
didn't
book.
give it that name. That's the name it's given.
Yeah.
It goes by different names,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that's the most appropriate. So I've heard golden hour and blue hour, but
Golden hours are
it's both golden and blue. So why isolate just one?
yeah, exactly.
So I
I
mean, it
think
starts
golden
off
hours are
golden and it switches to blue,
mm-hmm.
but neither one of them lasts an hour. The whole
Yeah,
thing does
yeah,
last about an hour, but that's why I call it magic hour and not blue hour and not golden
yeah.
hour.
Great time to catch neon lighting too. It's
Mm,
like I love shooting neon lights like down
yeah,
going to on Congress down like where Continental is over there in Austin, and then there is a guy that actually has a neon kind of sign museum there, and then there's another guy in Houston that also has like a neon sign museum, and those are just
yeah.
great to have.
Huh.
It's great to get pictures of them during that time. And have you been by Finer Works to see the new printer?
No, James had told me about it, but I
Yeah,
haven't seen it.
we're still getting it fine tuned. That's why I'm like I'm gonna kind of see it. He got everything up, but I don't ever know if when he's got to rush out to deal with that. So if he doesn't make it in, we'll kind of start going with him and without him, and he can
Sounds
jump
good.
in. He can jump in.
Last time I talked to him,
True.
he was telling me about how busy things have been and crazy, and he's keeping up with it all. Looks like he's doing real well, but it looks like there's just a lot of stuff on the finer works plate.
Oh yeah, there's so much interesting stuff. I mean, I'm having to learn a whole bunch of stuff just again because I have to relay it to everybody. But that dye bond printer is just amazing. It's so big. It's so huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a little scared of it sometimes to go near it because I'm like, is it gonna like run me over as it's printing? So it's
Wow.
it's
That's amazing.
huge. It's a big printer. It's a flatbed printer that's you think for sign shops. So just think of huge signs and think
Yeah.
about how much space this must take up. But the printing on it is amazing. I've seen the wood
Hmm.
panel print. I'm waiting to see some other materials that we want to try on there and see how this is going because now it's just going to be printed directly onto the surface of these media. So it should give an amazing look to it. So I've liked it. Was playing around like trying to see if I could scruff it up and stuff just because I'm always into how durable is it. Hold on, let me play with it. Hold on. I should actually just throw it in one of my bags for a while if it can last a week in one of my bags and not come up with any bad scuff marks. I think that's when it's past
That'll
the
be the sign. Wow.
yeah. So we got about 3 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and uh start letting everybody in. And then what I'm going to do is once I take that off, you don't have to worry about the waiting room. And you should be able to go ahead. Let me go ahead and admit everybody. Okay.
I know these guys.
I was going to say, I bet you know a number of these people who are joining us, don't you?
I know all of them.
Oh,
I haven't
that's
seen Don in
Hi,
a while.
Jim.
So, hey, Don, how's it going?
Hey, not too bad. Just been busy. But I thought I'd jump
Good.
on since I had availability tonight.
Yay. Glad to hear that.
so now we're getting everybody on here.
My
And
dog's been playing out in the water and he wants now to play with me.
no, And then if you like, guys, for those of us joining on Zoom, you can always go ahead and mute yourself. So that way background sound doesn't come over Jim's presentation. And we have the chat feature down there if you want to go ahead and just ask any questions, and I'll relay them over to Jim there. Let me just make sure I enabled that waiting room. Did not do that. Okay, there we go.
Look at that picture of Mike. You look sharp, Mike. White shirt, black fancy vest.
I like Jack's virtual background. That's great.
Isn't that
I was
great?
like trying to figure that out. I saw from here. I was like, behind you, something is not right. I was thinking he's going to be attacked by a bear.
He wants to show that he's just as brave as that 17-year-old girl that pushed away that bear the other day to save her dogs.
I was laughing. I'm like, that's two mama bears. Because, right before that, you see two little cubs running up that wall. And then there's the big bear trying to like swat at the dogs. And that little girl just comes and shoves her over.
Jeez. She's somebody I wouldn't want to mess with.
Right. Okay, well, we're at 4:00. So I'll introduce you then and give you control of the meeting in case there's something you want to show on your screen, Jim. And if you need to, just go ahead and make sure once I turn it over to you to pin yourself so that you're the dominant video on our YouTube. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again for this, I think now is our 6th, because we're in the 6th month of Photo Tips Monthly. And again, thank you so much, Jim, for doing this month after month with us, and you just have such a plethora of information to give. And I have told, artists, when they're asking why should they watch photo stuff? And I'm like, well, recently I saw a couple of artists dealing with what we talked about last month was copyright and getting some cease and desist. And the thing is, the source photos sometimes, source photos belong to the photographer. And I think we talked about that instance where Shepard Fairey used the Obama photo from the AP photographer, and there was a bunch of, kind of going back and forth of who owned the rights to the image. So photography skill sets are something just artists need to have. One, I think it's important to own your own source photo. If you're going to use your art, this is probably the best way, unless you're working in what I call collaboration with a photographer. And sometimes that helps too. And that's always a nice pairing when you see photographers and artists do collaborative work. But this one, low light photography, is going to be great because, again, source photography is important. And sometimes you want to catch just all of that natural light in a darker setting, moonlights, being in clubs. I used to shoot bands in clubs, and I remember trying to use either the stage lighting or no lighting at all. I think the first time I did that with 35 millimeter, I used to have like nothing on the negative because I would like open my aperture all the way and then I'd hit the flash on it big time. And you're probably only about a foot away on these small dive bars from the people. So, you just saturate them in light. But this is going to be a lot of help. And Jim has been gracious enough to every month give his time to kind of help all of us here. So we do appreciate it, Jim. And, you've been a longtime customer of Finer Works and a longtime friend for James and myself. So we've known you a lot of years here in San Antonio. So with that, I'm going to let you take over and talk about low light photography. And I'm going to give you host control. Okay, there you go.
Woohoo!
And
Oh, yeah, I record it.
hey, cool.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much for that warm, awesome welcome and pointing out a few really good things about what artists need to be thinking about and what things they have we have to deal with. So, you're doing I don't know if you guys know Melissa or not. I hope you do. You should. She is a strong contributor to the San Antonio creative community, and a strong supporter in lots of different ways. Not only just her job, but she shows up to different events when she can. She posts on her Facebook page and other sources different information for artists, those things that are directly for them and those things that can be helpful to them. And so she's just a wonderful contributor to the San Antonio creative community. And so I think we should all, you guys down in the hover over your screen, go to reactions and give her a thumbs up or a clap or a heart, because she deserves that and a whole lot more. She rocks.
Thank you so much.
And I'm not saying that just because you gave me control over this Zoom call. Well, I am so glad you guys are here today, and I can see that James has one of these rectangles on my screen. You guys can probably see it too. James, the owner of Finerworks, but he's busy installing I guess a brand new printer. At least I assume that's what he's working on. Every once in a while, I see his face come in. He's just checking to make sure that we're all here and okay, and there's no chaos going on. But when Melissa's in charge, there's no chaos. Everything is smooth, and so we appreciate all that James and Melissa are doing. Thank you guys for being here today. This is
Let's get you to pin your video really quick.
Oh yes, thank you.
Just so that way
you told me to do that, and I didn't listen, did I?
I got our YouTube on the side here, so there we go.
Oh, so now they can see me better?
It'll take a little bit. It's a little bit on a delay, but
and we're assuming that's a good thing, that they can see.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have done my hair.
Well, there you go. Now you are full screen on YouTube.
Yay. I'm so glad you guys are here. 4:00 on a Thursday. I know not everybody can do that. So that means you guys that are here are sacrificing something. You could be doing something else, and yet you've chosen to be here. And so I want to personally thank you on behalf of myself, Landers Photography School, for Melissa, for James, and for finerworks.com. Thank you guys for being here. I mean, this means a lot to us. We love sharing. We love talking about the things that creatives, photographers, artists love. We love talking about that stuff. And you guys apparently do too, or you wouldn't be here. So I know you guys are appreciative that Melissa and James and I are putting these kind of things together, but we are appreciative that you're here. We can't do this. We don't do this unless you show up, and you are showing up. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for your contribution, even if it's personal. It doesn't matter. Everything you're doing helps out the creative community. Thank you guys for being here. So today we're here to talk about low light photography, and low lights is the definition is pretty simple. It means anything less than sunlight. So you've got the bright, beautiful sunny days, everything, you get plenty of light in those situations. But what if it's less than that? A day, I don't know if for those of you that are here in San Antonio, this is an overcast day. It's been raining all day long. And so it's a darker day than normal. This is a low light environment, although it's not as low light as some of the things we're going to be talking about, because there are some things that it is really low light. And so we'll be talking about a few of those things today. Those of you who are here with us on Zoom, I want you to take advantage of a few things. Take advantage of the reactions. If I say something that you totally think is crazy, I want you to say something. I want you to go into your reactions and click on the open mouth or the heart or the whatever it is that you feel is appropriate. There you go, Don. Whatever. I like it when you hit the reactions. I can see some of those. Actually, there's enough of you where I can't see everybody, but I'm still liking it. And also take advantage of chat. If you've got a question, if you've got a thought that you want to bring up, ask me individually or ask the group. If you want it to go to the group, you just click on everyone. Actually, the default is everyone. If you want it to go to me directly, well, then just click that little down arrow and click on me. Or you could actually have a conversation with anyone in the group. That's the magic of Zoom, that you can do that. Those of you who are watching on Zoom, excuse me, on YouTube or Facebook or wherever else you may be watching, feel free to comment. We may not be monitoring it as well as we're monitoring the chat on Zoom, but we are monitoring that. Melissa takes a look at those and make sure that you guys get whatever questions answered that you have. And so please participate in that way. Put in the comments whatever thoughts you're having. If you want to add something, then great. We definitely recommend and welcome and encourage that kind of thing. We want that kind of interaction. All right. So back to low light photography. I mentioned a moment ago that the definition is anything less than bright sunlight. And so that really gives it a lot of leeway. We're talking from barely no light at all to still a relatively good amount of light, just less than full sunlight. So this is quite a range on the spectrum of amount of light. But I wanted to define a camera real quick. A camera is a simple definition. It's simply a light tight box with a hole. Everything else you know about photography and about cameras, it's just technology that has come onto the scene over the years. But a base definition of a camera is a light tight box with a hole, meaning no light gets in except by the singular hole, an aperture. That's where the light is coming in. A camera is a light collection device. A light collection device. So if there is no light, it can't collect anything. Kind of like when the bill collector calls and you've got no money for him. How much money does he get? Yeah. Hopefully you guys aren't dealing with that kind of situation. That wouldn't be fun. But for your camera, it's a light collection device. If there's light, it works. You can make it work. If there is no light, then there's nothing you can do. So light must be present in order for your light collection device to work. So let's say you're in a dark room, solid dark. There are no light leaks. If you're in that environment, it doesn't matter how long you leave that exposure open. You could leave it open overnight. If there is no light in that environment, it will never collect anything. You have a light collection device. So therefore, there must be some light present. And if there is some light present, then if you keep that aperture open long enough, you can collect enough light to collect the things, the light source or the light that is being reflected off different things in that environment. Now, I'm going to tell you something that some of you have heard me say before, but some of you might never have heard this at all. And those of you who haven't heard this before might think I'm crazy, but I'm going to explain it real quickly. Of course, you might think I'm crazy anyway. That's fine. There's a lot of things that you think that aren't true. Thanks, Don. One of them is that humans are visible. You'd be wrong in thinking that. Humans are invisible. I'm invisible. You're invisible. There is nothing about a human that causes you to be able to see another human within our human visual spectrum without a third party present. A third party must be present in order for us to become visible, because there's nothing about us that is visible on our own. That third party is light. Now that I've said to you, you're like, oh, weird. That's a weird way of saying that, but it's the truth. Light must be present in order for us to be visible. You've turned off the lights at night. You can't see anything in the room, at least not for a little while, if it's totally dark. Now, after a while, if there is some light, your eyes will adjust and you can start seeing things. But light had to be present in order for that to be possible. Therefore, humans are invisible. And a lot of things that you work with are invisible. Now, what things aren't invisible? Light sources. Those are visible within a human visual spectrum. Now, a human visual spectrum is a pretty narrow thing compared to the entire spectrum. A human visual spectrum is one side is just the inside of ultraviolet light, and the other is infrared. Those are the boundaries of human visual spectrum. Anything beyond that, we just can't see. Now, if we had infrared, we actually would become visible because we are a heat source. So therefore we would become visible even in a totally dark situation because of the heat signature that we have. But our camera, again, is a light collection device. Therefore, there must be light present in order for our camera to do anything. Unless you have one of those few that have been switched into an infrared camera. Are you guys familiar? Give me a thumbs up if you have heard of an infrared camera, that you know what I'm talking about if I say infrared camera. Yeah, so a few of you know what I'm talking about. Your camera doesn't have infrared. However, there are infrared filters. There are different things. There's things that you can do in post-processing that kind of makes it look infrared. But the only way to make a camera infrared is to have it switched into to give it the ability to do infrared. And by the way, you can do that. You can pay a company to do that for you. You can probably do it yourself, but I don't recommend that. But you can pay a company to turn your camera into infrared, and then you can photograph in total darkness, and anything that has heat will show up, even in total darkness. But once you have turned your camera into infrared camera, there is no going back. So it's a one-way thing. It is cool. It is certainly cool. But we're not talking about infrared cameras today. We're talking about what the cameras that we normally have that you can just buy easily, what they have the ability to do. And there's a lot. Now, I'm going to show you one of my handouts. In fact, I might show you a couple of different ones. Let me share my screen with you real quick. This is one of my low light handouts. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger because I know that on some screens it's tiny. So view and bigger. Nope, let's make that even bigger than that. All right, can you guys see that all right? Is that good size? Okay, good. All right, so low light photography. I mentioned earlier, what is low light? Any environment that has less light than light during the day. There are 3 light variables that you have on your camera. Many of you know this, but let's go over them real quick. ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Now, let's talk about each one of those just a little bit. ISO, in case you don't know, I'm going to tell you what it stands for, but I also want you to know that it doesn't matter because it doesn't change anything. It stands for International Standards Organization. Yep, you understand the concept now that I told you the word, right? What it means? No, come on. Yeah, that doesn't help us understand what it does. I have a different acronym for it. It's still ISO, but it is your image sensor's sensitivity option. Image sensor sensitivity option. So still ISO, but something that makes a little bit more sense to us. Because in our camera, we have the ability to change this. Now, ISO is the same thing. If you guys are familiar with film, if you have used film in either presently or in the past, then you understand when I say film speed. You would remember buying 100 speed, 200 speed, 400 speed, lots of different types, lots of different numbers. This is exactly the same with digital. I say exactly. It's relatively speaking the same. There's really nothing to learn new here if you understood it with film speed. The thing is, not everybody does understand ISO, but it is just your image sensor's sensitivity to light. You have the ability to vary this, to change it, to make it more sensitive to light. So in low light situations, you can imagine, sounds like a good tool. It's not the only one, but sure, it's a good tool. Now, on a lot of cameras, you have 100 as your low number, and you have some number as your high number. If it's an old camera, 10 years plus, then it'll be 1600, 3200. If it's a newer camera, then you will go into the tens of thousands, maybe in hundreds of thousands in the numbers. But each one of them, notice, is just doubling. And if you have numbers that are in between, then it's partial. But each one of them, 100, 200, it doubles the amount of light coming in. 200 to 400, doubles it again. 400 to 800, doubles it again, and so on. 800, 1600, 3200, 6400, and keep on going on and on. But you'll notice that number quickly becomes really high. So I want you, if you've got your camera handy, to just write down, if you're taking notes, what's your range on ISOs from the smallest number to the largest number? What is that range? And let's see. I'm going to share a different screen real quick. Stop that share and share a new screen. There it is. All right. So I want you to, on your notes, write down for your camera, whatever's your main camera, write down the lowest number and the highest number of your ISO. Now, if you have a Nikon, you are likely to have an L and an H at both ends. And what that means is you have the ability to go to an even lower sensitivity than 100 on the low end, on the L side, and on the H side, you have the ability to go to a higher sensitivity than the numbers that are there. Now, generally speaking, the reason why those don't have exact numbers is because the numbers aren't exact after that. And so they're just higher than by approximately a third, or by approximately 2/3, by approximately one full stop. And so, yeah, on a lot of Nikons, you have a little bit of leeway on both ends. And it's called the L for low on the 100 side, and an H for high on that high side. My screen is blinking, so that must mean I have someone asking a question or making a comment. Is that right? Oh, okay, good. So Mike, you wrote down yours. Will I be sharing my PDF file? Yeah, I don't know how much it's going to help, but I'd be happy to do that. Let's do that real quick. Let's see. I'm going to, yeah, I do have it. Okay. By the way, I'm showing you some things that aren't on this this handout, just so you know. But I definitely can share that with you. Give me just a moment. Usually this is in alphabetical order, and for some reason it's random. I haven't seen that before. Oh,
And
it's
those of us that are watching on YouTube, we'll make it available and we'll have that in the description later. And I see on our chat that everybody's kind of sharing some of their um, ISOs. Looks like from 50 to, what is that?
100 to 102,400, 40 to 40,000. No, 409,600. That's Mike. Joe, hey Joe. 60 to 128,000. I think you're missing a zero.
I like the from not low enough to not high enough.
That's funny, Charles. Yeah, that's right. We're going to be talking about that, Jack. You're right. There's some other variables, but yeah, that's a real concern is hand holding, because you have some limitations. You absolutely have limitations. Yep. And I know you know that. So I appreciate you saying it. Yeah. So that's good. So let's go back to that. So your ISO again stands for image sensor sensitivity option. Now this is Jim Lander's definition. I haven't seen that anywhere else. I have seen a couple other people that say it because they've taken my class, but I created that probably 10 years ago. Because International Standards Organization didn't help me or my students learn it. And I've been teaching since 97, and I've been saying ISO all along. So it probably took me about 13 years to decide to come up with a different way of describing that, or a different word for it. I've described it all along, but just a different word. So image sensor sensitivity option. Now, obviously, it's just for digital cameras that we would need to change that. Image sensor is just a singular thing. You're not changing it out. Like with film, you change out 100 speed. You could change it to 200 speed. You could change it out to 400. But with a digital camera, there is no changing out your digital sensor. And if you did, that would be an extremely expensive and time-consuming thing to do. So obviously, we're not going to. Yeah, you have the ability to vary it just by making a couple of changes on your camera. And so thank you guys for posting your range. And you can see it's quite a lot. If you had an older camera, I'd be able to tell based on your range because it would be very tiny. It'd be small. My first digital camera in 2002, February 2002, that was my first professional level digital camera. I played with it for probably about 3 years before. It was something I wouldn't use professionally. But I switched to digital in February 2002, and my very first camera had a range of 100 to 1600. That's it. That was its range. And it was awful at 800 and 1600. I'm sure you can imagine. The greater the number of your ISO, there's a side effect. Every single tool in photography has an effect and a side effect. The reason why you're using it, the effect, but then the side effect, the thing that also happens, kind of like if you go to the doctor and they prescribe something to you, it's got an effect and a side effect. Sometimes the side effects are good. Sometimes the side effects make you go, oh, I don't know if I want to take this. But same thing with photography. Sometimes the side effects are great. They're cool. They're amazing. They're creative. But ISO really doesn't fit that description. I guess maybe if you really wanted your image to look all, you wanted the grain size to be larger, the dots to look bigger, maybe you thought that looked cool for some specific image. Okay, then it would be a cool side effect. But for the most part, the larger the number of your ISO, the lower the quality. The dots just get bigger. The pixels get larger. You can see them very clearly. So this is one of the areas that technology has really increased over the years, and I anticipate will continue to increase. The cameras now look, the ISOs, the image sensors now, even with those higher numbers, up until a certain point, but even with those higher numbers, still look really good. It also depends on how you're going to be using the photograph, though. So if you're planning on using the photograph and send it to Finer Works to print on something that's in a really appropriate size for a really large wall. By the way, I don't say big print. I might say small print or little print or gift print. But a print size is you choose a print size based on the location it's going to be displayed in. At least I do. I know there's different reasons why you might print something. I know that Jack pre-prints things and sells some pre-printed stuff. So, and so he has an inventory of some of his work. I would assume he also has it available where someone could purchase any size they want. So the images that I create, generally speaking, I already know how they're going to be used. So I'm in the home or the location where it's going to be displayed. I can see the wall. I can see the size. I can see what the dimensions need to be, whether it needs to be vertical or horizontal. I can see all this ahead of time. And so I create for the location it's going to be displayed in. I know a lot of photographers don't do it that way. And so you kind of just have to anticipate what is the potential use of this photograph, because it does cause me to limit ISO. I might not be able to get past a certain number knowing how I'm going to use it later. So in low light situations where I need that lower number ISO, I might not be able to get it. I might have to get it some other way. Luckily, there's other ways. The next way I'm going to be talking about is through and I'm going to show you another screen, is through your shutter speed. And I don't remember what order I put this on your handout, but shutter speed is the next one I'm going to be talking about. Shutter speed, I'm going to define it, and you can see it on my screen right now. It's on a base definition, it's time value. In fact, that is what Canon and a couple other camera manufacturers call shutter speed. They may not even call it shutter speed. On a Canon camera, you'll notice that it says TV. Time value. It doesn't say shutter speed like it says on Nikon and most other cameras. I think Pentax also says TV, but most cameras say S for shutter speed, which makes sense to us. We know that word. Time value, it's the definition of the word, which is a weird thing to title it by, but I kind of like it. I like calling something what it actually is. Shutter speed is just a time value, but I like giving it a better definition. I call it a summary of the period of time that light hits the image sensor. So you press the shutter and it opens up, and it's open for however long you've set it for, and then it closes. During that time, it's collecting light. It's collecting time also, but it's collecting light. If you're in a low light situation, having more time to collect light, that's a good thing. Unless the thing you're photographing is in motion, and in your mind, you want to stop that motion. So we've got a couple of things really to think about here. Yes, we can use shutter speed to collect more light. We absolutely can. But it's also possible, because that's a defect, its side effect is motion. Being able to convey motion with a longer shutter speed, or stop motion with a shorter period of time that it's open. So if my goal were to photograph a car driving by and I wanted to stop its motion, you guys probably know you need a very short period of time to stop its motion. Probably 1/250th of a second, 1/500th of a second, 1/1000th of a second. You need a short period of time to be able to stop the motion. Now, what happens if you don't have enough light to make that happen? Well, luckily, shutter speed isn't the only thing that collects light. Luckily, there's two more variables. With shutter speed, we are collecting light, just like the other two variables, and time. So if I want to photograph something in a bright light situation, let's say that this class was at a waterfall, some beautiful waterfall on a bright, beautiful, amazing sunny day. Perfect weather, low humidity, and no mosquitoes. We can choose to stop the motion of that waterfall. We can choose to make it exactly the way we see it. By the way, you have a human shutter speed. Yes, you see in video, but you have a human shutter speed, a way that you view time, a way that you understand time. And your human shutter speed is about 1/24th of a second. So that means shutter speeds that are faster than that stop motion as you understand it. Shutter speeds that are a longer period of time convey motion as you understand it until it makes the motion disappear. I mentioned earlier that you, as a human, are invisible. Armed with what I've just shared with you, you can photograph the Alamo in the middle of the day on a bright, beautiful, sunny day with no people walking by, even though there are people walking by. And the reason is because you're in control of time. You are choosing, you are saying it is properly exposed at whatever shutter speed you choose. You're in control. Camera's not in control. Yes, you can put it in control. You can put it in the shutter priority. You can put it in program mode. You can put it in auto mode. And the camera's in control of the exposure at that point. But you are in control if you choose to be in control. If I say it takes 8 seconds to photograph the Alamo, then I can change the other variables to make that a true statement. Now, because 8 seconds is a long period of time on a bright sunny day, I actually have to put the equivalent of sunglasses in front of my lens. And that's called neutral density filters. And I might need more than one, or I might need a variable neutral density filter, one that as you turn it, it gets darker, and as you continue to turn it, it gets lighter again. By the way, it's two polarizing filters moving against each other that causes that to happen. But either way, my goal in that instance is to have less light. Obviously, not what we're trying to accomplish with the low light photography class, but I want to give you that contrast so you can see one end of the spectrum, because I think it makes it easier to understand both ends when you hear both sides. Understand the whole concept when you hear both sides of that concept. So what is your longest shutter speed available to you on everything that's on your camera? So you also have bulb mode when you're in manual mode, meaning as long as you're pressing down the shutter, it remains open. But as far as what are the numbers on your camera, for most, it starts off at 30 seconds. That's 30 with two little tick marks on it, kind of like inches, but for photographers, that means seconds. 30 seconds on the long end, and on the short end, usually 4,000th of a second. On a lot of cameras, it's 8,000th of a second. But that's generally the range of shutter speeds that you have available. Check that out on your camera. You're welcome to put that in the chat if you'd like, but just write it down for yourself in your own notes. What's your range? Your longest period of time compared to your shortest period of time? There's going to be times in low light situations where you actually have to purposefully choose a shorter time period in order to stop the motion of something, which means you're going to have to get your light from either the ISO or the aperture. There are a ton of things we can talk about when it comes to shutter speed. I'm going to give you a couple of them before I move on. Those of you who've seen me speak many times might have heard this particular story before, but it applies here. So I want to share it again. And for those of you who haven't heard it, well, then it's new. For those of you that have, please don't put rerun in the comments. That'll hurt my feelings. No, it won't. I don't really care. But here's a story I have to share. Several years ago, see, my boys now are in their 20s, and one of them just graduated from college a couple of weeks ago, and he does still live here, and the other one moved out, and so we don't have that stereotypical, mom, dad, two kids, and everybody's all doing the same things all the time anymore. But it used to be that way, and every year we would plan a trip called the Landers Men trip. And for those of you who are offended by that, no, we did not exclude Robin. Robin excluded Robin. We did invite Robin on the first trip. It's just she didn't remember it. She remembered it as being a whole lot more fun when she was a kid going camping. I guess as an adult going camping, you have a whole lot more responsibilities, a whole lot more things to do. And when you're mom, oh yeah, you got a lot of stuff. And so she chose not to go on those trips anymore. And so that's why it became the Landers Men trip, because it was me and my boys. We actually had my brother and his son too. We went on the Landers Men trip, and I'm going to share with you one of those trips. We were at Lake Buchanan, which is about 2 hours north of San Antonio, just straight north on 281, if you're familiar with this area of the world. And it is it's a lake that's on the Colorado River. Pretty place. In fact, there are bald eagles that live on the river section. You can actually take a boat and go find them at certain times of the year. Kind of fun. I don't know if they still have it, but they used to have something called the Vanishing Texas River Cruise. Yeah, if they still have it, I recommend it. It was fun. But we didn't get to go on it this time. There was no water in the lake. We didn't know that going in. I mean, the whole reason you go to the lake is because of the water. I guess the hiking too, but you could go hiking at some place it's not a lake. So that wasn't there, and we didn't know that. We didn't anticipate that. And something else that I didn't look into, which I do recommend if you're going out, is check to see what the moon's going to be like. It was a new moon, which if you're photographing stars, excellent. But it was dark out there. Now, why would that bother me? Well, because when you go camping, we like to have a fire. If there hasn't been rain, if the lake is low, if there's no water in the lake, it's because there hasn't been rain. If there hasn't been rain, then a burn ban is in effect. It was really dark out there. And so I told you earlier that a camera is a light collection device. So if it's really dark out there, then how are you going to collect any light? You have light sources. You can play. So what did we do? I set the camera on the picnic table because I forgot my tripod. Don't forget your tripod. Bring your tripod. You need that thing. But I set it down on the picnic table, and I set it for 15 seconds. and I told the boys to write something in the sky with their cell phone. And so they wrote things like hi and their names, and even wrote their names in cursive. Guess what they have to do though? They have to, there's just a little aside, they have to write backwards because they're writing it to the camera, not to themselves. It's not reflected light, it's direct. So it has to be written backwards. So of course, when my boys wrote their names in cursive backwards, I was thinking, yeah, I got some smart kids there. I like that. So yeah, so that's what's going through my head. But you can play even in low light, even in no light situations, because you have light sources. You can even turn a flashlight around and paint the things that are in your environment, and don't paint the things that you don't want to have light. A little tip, and if you were with us last night at Chelsea's presentation about night photography settings, when you do paint with light, don't come from low to high. Point your flashlight up and bring it down, and then turn it off without ever showing it on the ground, because the ground is closer to you. It will receive more light. Anything that's close to a light source is brighter. I mean, if you just take your hand and move it close to a lamp, the light reflecting off your hand gets brighter as you get closer to it, and it gets darker the further you pull it away. And I just realized I don't need to show that screen anymore. But the closer you bring your hand to a light source, the more light's going to be reflecting off of it. And as you pull it away, it gets less and less and less. In a low light situation, that could be helpful. It could be as simple as bringing light closer to your subject, or moving your subject closer to the light source to bring in more light. Now, Jack mentioned a little while ago about shutter speed. And about choosing a shutter speed and hand holding it. With a handheld camera, there is a limit on how long a period you can go before you run the risk of camera movement, just because of as simple as pressing down the shutter causes a slight bit of movement. So anything that's 1/100th of a second or faster, pretty much don't have to worry about that. But anything that's 1/30th of a second and slower, a longer period of time, so 1/30th of a second, 1/15th of a second, 1/8th of a second, 1/4th of a second, these are really too long to hand hold your camera. And so I absolutely recommend that your camera is hands-free. And the best tool for that, tripod. I bet you guys already knew that part of it. Tripod, excellent tool. If you don't have a tripod, I absolutely recommend you look into buying a tripod. And so, go online, go to a local camera store, but yeah, you need a tripod, especially in low light situations. Get yourself a tripod. This also has to do with lenses. The longer the lens, the larger the number of the lens. So if you're zoomed into 200, 300, 400, if you're zoomed into these larger numbers, then it's taking this whole area and you're zooming in on one small part of it, which means even the slightest motion is going to show up. And so I feel like anything that's higher than 100 millimeters, you really need a tripod pretty much always, or a shutter speed that is a minimum of the focal length. So if you have a 200 millimeter lens and you're zoomed into 200, then a 200th of a second or faster, and you're okay. If you've got a 400 millimeter lens, a 400th of a second or faster, which is a really short period of time. And if you're in low light, it doesn't work. So that is why having a tripod gives you some more leeway. You can choose those lower numbers. But what if you're photographing wildlife? There's that bear behind Jack right now, and so he photographs wildlife. He's got bird photographs and all different kinds of things. A long shutter speed and birds, I don't know that that's the right combo. A slow shutter speed and bears, pretty sure that's not the right combo. And so because they move, they're not. It's not like you can go, all right, hey bear, for a moment, I need to get your portrait, so I need for you to be still for a 1/30th of a second. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Here we go. Now, it doesn't work that way. So you're forced to use those longer shutter speeds, the shorter period of time shutter speeds, and you're forced to get your light from somewhere else. It probably is going to be the ISO. It probably is also going to be your f-stop, which we're going to move into in just a moment. but you have variables. You've got things to choose from. Any other thoughts on either the ISO or the shutter speeds before I move into aperture?
Looks like we're all good there. I don't see any questions kind of coming in. I guess the one thing I could think of also is when you're doing low light and people end up using flashes or strobes, is that also in something where you want to stop the action but keep the low light of the
Yes,
background?
it is. Yeah, that's a good thing to paint someone's mind. And let's give I guess a real example of something you might actually do. Let's say that you're at a wedding reception and you're photographing the first dance. If you choose a shutter speed that's too long, they blur. And maybe it looks kind of cool for one, but that's really not what you want. You want to stop its motion, the motion. However, what if the lighting is not very much? Because at a wedding reception, it often starts off with plenty of light, but they also often dim the lights. And so there's just not a lot of light there. And so ideally, you need to do something to get more light. And so time is one of those things. You can increase the amount of time and get more light. Yes, that is one of the tools available to you. But in this particular instance, it's not one you want to choose. And so in this instance, I want to increase my ISO, go to a higher number, a much, much higher number. If I can create that image without using my flash, I want to do that. I also want to use my flash because I can create a different look. I can purposefully allow a little bit of blur in the motion, in the direction of my motion, to have my flash go off at the end of that exposure. So that's a rear sync, which is where your flash goes off at the end of the exposure. So I could choose maybe a tenth of a second, and the flash is an instant. And so it could go off at the beginning of that tenth of a second or at the end of that second. For a human, it doesn't feel like that's a very long period of time, but it's long enough for your flash to go off a whole bunch of times if it had the power to recycle fast enough. And maybe you had it on a lower setting, but still, you can choose to have that motion as part of it. Because otherwise, if they're dancing in a way that a traditional dancing, they may have one hand out and an arm around. I don't know if I'm showing that very well in my frame. Maybe I should back up just a little bit. There we go. So one arm out and then holding their dance partner. So if they're doing that kind of traditional, but a lot of them hug during a dance, and so therefore, if you choose a fast shutter speed and a flash, then it just looks like a hug. It doesn't say dance. And I want my photograph, and you want your photographs to tell the story. Whatever story it is that you intend to tell, you want it to tell that story. And if my first dance story instead says, oh, they're hugging, I haven't done my job. And so I want a little bit of motion to show. And so I'm doing effectively two exposures in one. I'm allowing that motion to show up about a tenth of a second. And at the end of that exposure, because I want the motion to go into the stopped part of it, when my flash goes off, I stop the motion. Whatever is happening at that moment, I stop it, because that flash, boom, goes and stops that motion for just a second. And so I use this a lot of times when I'm photographing certain things. So sometimes a flash isn't the right tool, but when it is, and when it's used correctly, it can be amazing, because you can purposefully get more light in the background that would show up solid. I mean, there's times when I'm in some interesting environment and I want this environment to show. It's pretty, but I need a longer period of time to collect the amount of light. But I need to stop the motion or get something closer, or I have some other thing that I want to also have. And so effectively, I'm getting the exposure of that background. Even if, say you're photographing a wedding and you've got all the people standing in front, but that background is dark. The light that you're putting on them is dark. I want a longer period of time to collect the light in the background to show that off. But I might also want the opposite, because I've photographed events in environments that were not that pretty, like gyms that are cinder block walls. I want that to go black. And so I purposely choose a faster shutter speed and use my flash to get the correct exposure and allow that background to go black, so I can't tell if it's far enough away. Now, if someone's up against the wall, there's nothing you can do. But if they're far enough away, then the background goes black. For instance, I was photographing. Do you guys know if you've heard of the NBA and you've heard of the Spurs, then you probably would have heard of a player named Manu Ginobili. So several years ago, I was photographing him for an ad, and this is I was working with a company out of Argentina, where he's from. They came here, and we photographed him. And we were at the La Cantera Hotel, and I didn't know that they wanted a black background for one of these images, but that's not a problem, because all I need to do, and we had a ballroom as our studio, and talk about an awesome space for a studio. And so all we did was we backed away from the background, from the wall. We backed away from the wall, and I lit him with a little bit more light than I would otherwise, so that the background would not have enough light on it, and therefore went solid black, because I'm in control. These tools I have control over. They aren't in control of me. I know if you're in auto mode, then you get what you get. You don't throw a fit. Isn't that what kindergarten teachers tell their kids? You get what you get. You don't throw a fit. Well, it doesn't work that way in real life unless you allow it to work that way. You're in control. You're in control. All these tools you're in control of. You can do whatever you want with them, as long as you understand what the tools are, what they're supposed to do, how they're used, and just all these other awesome variables that we have available to us. You're in control. Isn't that fun? I like that I can share a story about photographing Manu Ginobili. He was a cool dude.
Jill is a cool dude.
I'm thinking about things that happened during that time. They kept on asking him for autographs, and I was thinking, man, you got to slow down on that. I don't know how many autographs they asked for, but each one of them was asking. They brought in things and kept on asking him to sign this for my cousin and my other cousin and my other cousin. And it was, I don't know, he probably signed 200 things from this group of maybe 5 people. It was ridiculous, I thought. But I guess maybe that's normal there. Maybe it's normal here. I don't think we should bother people with stuff like that. But that's just me. Everybody to each his own, right? All right. So I want to move into aperture. Now, I do have a handout for that as well, so I'm going to share the screen in just a moment, but I'm going to define what that is. Aperture is just the hole that lets light in. That's it. I know a lot of people have a different understanding of what an aperture is, but the definition of aperture is simple. It's a hole that lets light in, and that's any hole that lets light in. These holes right here, those little black dots, aperture. That's an aperture. If I had a hole in my roof and it was letting the rain in today, that's an aperture too. Any hole that lets light in is an aperture. We, though, as photographers, care how much light is coming in. So therefore, we have a unit of measurement to measure how much light is coming in. And you guys know that as an f-stop. Now, what does the F stand for? Focal. Kind of one of those who cares things, just like ISO. Focal stop. That's what it stands for. No one ever says focal stop. Have you guys ever heard anyone say it correctly all the way out? No. Who cares? Focal stop. Yeah, no. F-stop. It's a unit of measurement to measure how much light is coming through that aperture. No, f-stop and aperture are not the same thing. One's a hole that lets light in. The other is the unit of measurement to measure how much light that hole is allowing in. F-stop. Let me share my screen real quick, and you can see what I have prepared for you. And so if you're going to, for me, I have my camera in manual mode pretty much always. There's exceptions, but I understand that's not the case for everyone. And so if you're going to control only the f-stop, then you would want to put your camera in the aperture priority mode where you're in control of the f-stop. If you're in Canon, it's AV for aperture value. What is the value of the aperture? What's the size? How much light is it letting in? Now, the effect you see here, amount of light. Remember that from shutter speeds and ISO? Of course, because all three have the exact same effect. All three have different side effects. The side effect is for aperture is depth of focus. Now, this only applies really for things that are relatively close. If you're photographing something that has some distance, this doesn't affect it quite as much. Now, there are some variables, but I'm generalizing. When it's a close subject, this makes a big difference. In fact, if you've got a macro lens, depending on the macro lens, of course, you could actually photograph my eyelashes. Let me show. You could photograph my eyelashes. Camera's coming in from this side. You could photograph my eyelashes and get one eyelash in focus and the other eyelashes out of focus. You have that kind of control if you have the tools available to you, of course. One eyelash. When you do that, you have opened that opening as large as it will go, most likely. As large as it'll go. The larger the opening, the more light comes in. That part makes sense because as we make it smaller and smaller, less light comes in. Now with f-stops, they're going to appear to be in reverse because the smaller the number, the larger the opening. And conversely, the larger the f-stop number, the smaller the opening. It's because they're fractions. So if we have f4 versus f8, 4 versus 8, let's say there's only 4 of us here today. And let's say we're meeting in person and there is $1 million in between us. You tell me, if there were 4 or 8, which number is bigger as far as what you're taking home? The 4. 4 is bigger because we're talking about fractions. We're talking about bringing it in, not making it bigger, because you only have as large as the lens that you can go. You can't get any larger than that. So you're talking about a fraction of the entire space, making it smaller, making it less than. So that's why the smaller the number, the larger the opening. And the larger the number, the smaller the opening. Before I go any further, do you guys understand that? Does that make sense? Got it? I'm seeing some nods. Cool. Ooh, and a thumbs up. Thank you. Awesome. So, back to the screen. This, we did blur the background a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I don't remember. And so you did see this, but this photograph that you're seeing, am I sharing the right screen? Yeah. Okay. So this little screen, this image that you're seeing here of the Hershey's Kiss. Do you see those little lights looking things that are behind it? Do I need to make that bigger or can you see it?
You might make it a little bigger for those folks watching maybe on YouTube on small handheld devices.
Let's do 200. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So that should help. All right. So we've got this photograph of this Hershey's Kiss, and we've got these little circles of light behind it. Those are called circles of confusion, but we popularly call them bokeh or bokeh. It's the same thing. It's just how you choose to say it. It's a Japanese word, effectively meaning fuzzy or blurry, and it is bokeh. That is the proper way to say it, as far as my understanding. But I do know a lot of people say bokeh, and so either way, it's fine. It means the same exact thing. It means circles of confusion, but it's also one of those things. How many times do you hear people say circles of confusion? I never hear anybody say that. When I got my degree in photography, they called it by its real name. But then when you get out in the real world, you realize people have their own names for things. And circles of confusion isn't it. Focal stop, not it. We have different names for different things. And as long as we understand, that's all that matters. But those little circles of confusion, that bokeh, is caused by low numbered f-stop in combination with being very close to your subject and your background, whatever that subject is that's in the background, far away relative to the camera to subject distance. So this is a lower light situation, what you're seeing here. This is low light. You can see that some of these areas have gone to solid black. There's just no detail in them whatsoever. There's a little bit of light that's coming in from a distant window. That's what you're seeing reflected off of this Hershey's Kiss. But those things in the back aren't Christmas lights. Those are also Hershey's Kisses. It's just a bunch of Hershey's Kisses in the back. Every single one of those dots is part of, now I think there's 2 or 3 that make up each kiss, because there aren't that many kisses back there. But each one of those is part of the metal, the aluminum on the Hershey's Kiss. And so this is caused by a low numbered f-stop, your camera close to your subject, as close as you can get it. You have a closest focusing distance with your lens, just like you do with your own eyes. So with your own eyes, you can get only so close before you can't see it anymore. If you're trying to read something, you pull it in as close or far away. And so as you age, you may have to pull it further and further and further away in order to read something. But there's a closest focusing distance with your eyes and for lenses. Get as close as your lens will allow you. If that's not close enough, you may need to change your lens to something that's closer. And a low numbered f-stop. Now, this is relative to what your lens has available. The lower that number, the better, as far as getting your background out of focus. But also collecting enough light in a situation like this. We have to collect the correct amount of light. And since this was a relatively low light environment, I needed to open that f-stop up in order to get the low light. But it also gave me that advantage of having what I think is a really cool looking background. Now, what if I wanted to get all those Hershey's Kisses in the background sharp and in focus as well? It means that I have to choose an f-stop number that's much higher. And in this instance, I'd probably have to go to f16 or f22 in order to get all of them in focus. What would that do to the amount of light coming in, though? Because I have a smaller opening allowing light to come in, I have less light coming in. I'm going to have to get my light from a different source. In this instance, because nothing's moving and because I had the camera on a tripod, I'm kind of unlimited on the shutter speed side of things. So I'm not going to choose my ISO. I'm going to leave my ISO probably at 100, 200, low number, because I know that's a higher quality setting. And I'm going to get my light from my time. I'm going to collect more time to get more light. That's the choice I'm going to make. So how long is it going to be? It depends on how much light you have. There's no one solid answer to that. Everything's variable. It's dependent on the environment that you're in. So how much time? Well, maybe it was 5 seconds. Maybe it was 10 seconds. Whatever it takes to get the correct exposure. What's correct exposure? That's defined by you as the artist, as the creator. What's the right amount of light? Someone else doesn't get to decide that. It's your choice. So you play with those variables until you get what is, by your definition, correct. Now, I know early on you might think, well, someone else looking at that, does that look too dark or too bright? After you've been doing this for a while, you know what's too bright or too dark. Someone else is welcome to their opinion, but you're the artist, you're the creator. So therefore, it's up to you. Whatever's appropriate, whatever's right by your definition. And so we are changing these variables in order to get that correct exposure. Yep, there's more stuff I could talk about on the aperture, but do you guys have any questions before I keep on going?
I don't see any coming in quite yet.
All right, so I'm going to, what was that?
I think we're good. We can go ahead and move on. I don't see any questions popping up.
Awesome. That means I'm doing an incredible job. So again, there are so many things we could talk about just aperture for hours. We could talk about just shutter speed for hours. We could talk about just ISO for 30 minutes. So uh, but there's so many things we could talk about, but I think we've done a good job with that. But I wanted to make sure that we talked about tripods. Tripod is a stabilization tool. I don't have any tripods that I can recommend that are under 125, 150. I just don't like any of them that are under that amount. I think that they don't serve their purpose because they are too lightweight. Now, I understand there's something called a travel pod, and there are times when that is totally appropriate, especially if you're using a GoPro or something like that. Those Gorilla Pods are pretty cool for a GoPro. But for photographers, man, a lot of us have pretty heavy equipment. And so I recommend a very sturdy tripod that's going nowhere, even if it's windy. But if you do have one of those lighter weight tripods, just grab a grocery bag, put some rocks into it, and hang that on the little hook on the bottom of the tripod. And you've pretty much solved my problem with most tripods. So that doesn't mean you have to buy a new one, but the tripods that are sturdy. And so they're going to be 150, 250, 350, and maybe a little bit more than that. I don't really have any that I recommend that are above 500 for the most part. It's because it becomes overkill for most situations. Not all. There are times when it is those more expensive ones are the ideal tool for what it is you're trying to accomplish. But I want something that's relatively sturdy. And if you're doing a lot of hiking, if you're photographing wildlife, then you're probably doing a lot of walking up and down hills and difficult situations, and you want to lighten the load. And your tripod, your camera equipment, your lenses, they're all heavy, and so maybe the tripod is one area we can lower a little bit. So they do have the carbon fiber tripods, and these are the same size. They're very sturdy. They weigh less, probably a third less, and that might be the right tool. That might be the right choice. But for me, since I don't do a whole lot of hiking and I'm not worried about that kind of thing, and most of the places I go, I can just put it in my little cart that has wheels on it, and I just put it in there, so I'm not worried about the weight of it. Therefore, I want those heavier aluminum. Now, because I often am close to my subject, I want a tripod that's black, because I don't want the light from it reflecting into my subject. But for some situations, it just doesn't matter. I just prefer a solid black tripod. But I've seen some other cool ones. I have aluminum unpainted tripods. They're good. There's nothing wrong with them. And I've seen those cool blue ones and orange ones and red ones. Those are awesome too. I just don't have a need for those. But if you do, they're awesome. They're cool. And if the name of your business is Red Photography, maybe having a red tripod is appropriate. You could also get a red camera and red lens. Wouldn't that be cool? So for marketing purposes, it's the right tool for you. But let's move into lenses. We touched on it slightly. But when it comes to low light, man, lenses are where it's at. The lower the number of the f-stop, generally speaking, the higher the quality of the lens. And I say generally speaking because that's not always the case. But if my goal is to be able to photograph in the lowest light situations, then it may be I have to either choose the tool that I have that's the lowest numbered f-stop, or I need to purchase a lens with a really low numbered f-stop. And you can see here that in this handout, and this is the one that you guys have, most consumer lenses have a 3.5 for their maximum aperture at its widest focal length. A lot of like kit lenses, like the simple kit lens, the 18 to 55 is 1:3.5-5.6. 1: means maximum amount of light. That's what the 1: on your lens means. What's the maximum amount of light that this lens has the ability to give me? 3.5-5.6, which seems like an odd thing. If you're saying what's the maximum amount of light, then why does it have a range? Because it's not the range of f-stops available on your camera. It's only the range of maximum f-stop available on your camera. So why would there be a range? There's a range because you have a focal length range. from 18 to 55. As you zoom from 18 to 55, as you're zooming in, you get less light. You're using less. So therefore you get less light. It automatically, just the nature of the lens, goes from f3.5 to 5.6 as you zoom in. And if you needed that 3.5, that's going to be pretty frustrating for you. So therefore, the solution, not the immediate solution, but the solution is to buy a different lens. Now, prime lenses get these lower numbered f-stops built in. That's just how they are for the most part. Exceptions there as well. But for the most part, prime lenses, meaning they do not zoom. You've got prime lenses and you've got variable focal length lenses, which are called zoom lenses. A zoom lens, you understand what a zoom lens is. You turn it and it zooms in or zooms out, depending on which way you turn it. A prime lens or a fixed focal length lens doesn't. You can turn it, but it only focuses with that. It doesn't zoom in or out. Yes, you can walk closer or you can walk further away, but there is no convenience of being able to zoom in closer or being able to zoom out. Not on a prime lens. The prime lens, the fixed focal length lens, the advantage to it is more light. More light comes into those lenses. Why does more light come into that lens? Because there's less stuff holding all the things together in there. With a zoom lens, you've got to be able to move all those elements so that you can be able to zoom in and zoom out. If I don't have that in my lens, if I don't have that need, then I have less stuff holding all that stuff together. I don't have the tracks that are in there causing it to move backwards and forwards. So therefore, there's less stuff, takes up less space. Therefore, I'm able to use more of my lens. That's why I can get those lower numbered f-stops. That's why I can get more light entering in a prime lens versus a zoom lens. The advantage to a zoom lens is convenience, though. So I understand why you'd want that. So if you want to go from that 18 to 55 with a 3.5-5.6, you can actually upgrade that lens to an f2.8 that doesn't have a range. You can zoom in from 18 to 55 and it stays at the 2.8. But the price difference is pretty significant. So if you were to buy that 18 to 55, now I know most people don't ever buy an 18 to 55 because it came with a lens, came with a camera, it's a kit lens, but it's about $200. If you want to get the upgrade so that it doesn't have that problem of as you zoom in, it gets less light coming in, add another zero. Yeah, it's going to be nearly $2,000 to get the upgrade to it. So most of us aren't going to go that route. We're just going to deal with it some other way. But one way is with a fixed focal length lens. Yep, we can't zoom in anymore with it, but it allows more light to come in. And so if you've got a Nikon camera, you can see some of the ones that I recommend here. If your goal was to bring in more light into your camera, we have all different kinds of goals. So I'm not saying that you need to go out and buy this lens. I'm saying if you are in an environment where you feel like you're going to be photographing more and you need to get more light coming in, then you may choose to get a Nikon 50mm 1.4 or a 1.8. Maybe you want a 35mm, maybe you want a 100mm, whatever is appropriate from the millimeters. Basically, so the larger the number, the more you're zooming in. The smaller the number, the more wide angle you are. But I want to point out the difference between a 1.4 and a 1.8. The difference in price is significant. You are doubling the amount of light. So therefore, don't be surprised that it's a lot more expensive. It's more glass. More glass, more cost. Makes sense. What if I got a 1.2? More cost. What about a 1.0? More cost. Can you get more than 1.0? Mm-hmm. Yep, sure can. But it costs a lot more. You'll see it when you start looking it up. If you haven't already, maybe you have. Maybe you know this. You probably know this. But the lower that number, the more expensive the lens gets because you have to have more glass in order to get more light. Now, I do mention here on this that we've got vibration reduction and image stabilization. These are exactly the same thing. It's just different brands have a different name for it. There is no one standard. So each camera manufacturer has a different name for it. Nikon calls it vibration reduction. Canon calls it image stabilization. This causes you to be able to use a slower shutter speed and still be just fine. So what we talked about earlier, having somewhere between a 30th of a second and a 1/100th of a second as your minimum handheld speed, you get to have a little bit lower. So for me, I don't go under maybe an 80th of a second. And if I am using a lens that has vibration reduction or image stabilization, I can go down to a 60th of a second, a 30th of a second, maybe even smaller, a longer period of time, and still be fine, still get my image sharp and in focus. The motion of me holding the camera, pressing the shutter, any motion in there is not showing up because I have this advantage. So this helps in low light situations. If you have your camera on a tripod though, it has an off switch on that lens, turn it off. It's probably not going to cause any problems, but the on off switch is there specifically for that reason. Effectively, you're telling it the potential for motion exists. But if you've got it on a tripod, the potential for motion does not exist. So therefore, it has the potential, very small, like 1 in 1,000 chance of creating motion for you. It's kind of if you played football and you're the middle linebacker, you're expecting some motion to happen. However, if they're in the huddle, the offense is in a huddle, you're not ready for motion. You're not ready for action. So therefore, you're off at that moment. But once they come up to the line, you are on, because you're expecting some motion. So therefore, turn it off when you're not expecting any motion if you've got a vibration reduction lens or that option on your lens. Any thoughts about lenses before I move to color balance?
No questions are coming in here, Jim.
Cool. Good. Well, this last section is on color balance. And color balance is just a tint, a color change, a color difference, something that you can observe very easily with your eyes. So when you're in a low light environment, you often will notice this more than in a brighter light environment, because the light in, let's say you're inside a home or inside a hotel, the lights inside homes is often on the warm side, and with lower lighting situations, you often have images that come out kind of orange, kind of yellow orange, maybe brownish, kind of sometimes a dirty, dingy kind of a look. Now, if this is a photograph in front of a fireplace, maybe it's a romantic photograph of a couple sitting on a couch having wine in front of a fireplace. That warm look adds to the photograph. It really does. It looks great. But there's other times a warm look takes away from it. It looks dirty. It looks like they've been smoking in that house for 20 years and they need to clean the darn lights or stop smoking so it doesn't happen. Sorry. But we don't want that sometimes. And so how do we get rid of that? Well, this is where color balance comes in. If you don't like how it looks, then you can make a change. Now you can make a change in camera, or you can make a change in post. If you're photographing in RAW, you don't need to worry about it, because you're going to have to mess with it afterwards anyway. If you're photographing in JPEG, you need to fix it in camera. So does that mean I recommend that you photograph in RAW? I recommend that you use the tools that are appropriate for what it is you're trying to accomplish. So therefore, there's not a whole lot of blanket statements that I can really make when it comes to photography and for artists in general. But specifically speaking, there are many times when I recommend that you photograph in RAW because of the advantages of RAW. One of the advantages of JPEG is speed, though. Everybody uses a JPEG. If your goal is to have an image ready as quickly as it can possibly be ready, JPEG's the way to go. But if you've got time to work with your photographs in Lightroom, in Photoshop, and some other image manipulation program, then RAW is the way to go. Yes, it takes more work. It takes more time. But if you can do that, and if you have the software and you know how to use the software, of course. By the way, if you don't know how to use the software to manipulate it, then a JPEG's not going to help you very much, because you can't use a digital file that's a RAW for anything other than your image manipulation programs to take it through a process to get it to the point where you can actually share it with someone else as, generally speaking, a JPEG. But there's other image formats. There's TIFFs, there's PNGs, there's the new web format. So there's lots of different types that you can use, but JPEG is a standard. When you look at a photograph on a website, it's probably a PNG or a JPEG. Could be a GIF, however you say it, but it's probably a JPEG or the new web file format for images. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but you'll become familiar with it because it makes for a smaller file size. And when Google ranks in the organic search, one of the things it pays attention to is, have you paid attention to the size of the things that are in there? Are you paying attention to the bandwidth that your whole website is using? So yeah, it plays a role. But bottom line, RAW doesn't delete any information. Nothing. If you put your camera in monochrome, black and white, if you created the image on your camera in black and white, you're seeing it on your screen in black and white. If you created that as a RAW, guess what happens? Nothing. You don't have a black and white. But as far as image manipulation, if your goal is to create black and white images, man, there are some amazing tools. Nick software, there's others that are amazing for turning your images to black and white. I would say don't do it in camera. Now, if that's the way you do it, then I want you to do it the way you're comfortable. But for those who want options, create in RAW and use your image manipulation software to create your masterpiece. Do it later. Worry about it later. As far as color balance, when working with it afterwards in the manipulation program, this is just like the amount of light. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You're choosing the right amount of color tint that you feel is the right amount. If you feel it looks a little too orange, you're going to take that orange out or add blue. It's the same thing. And to be able to clear that up a little bit, play with a little bit, compare and contrast. But a lot of images will come out on that warm side. A lot of images come out on that warm side. And you may have to work with that in post-production. There are software programs that can reduce the dots that you see on photographs. So if you've purposefully had to choose a high ISO, which a lot of times is the right thing. If you're photographing the night sky, you're going to choose a high ISO. And a small numbered f-stop, that combo. So if you need to put that through, there's something called Noise Ninja. There's Lightroom and Photoshop have something that reduces that. And so there are tools for that. I think that FinerWorks has had a tool for that to help out with photographers for a long time. And so there are tools to help with when you are forced to use that high ISO when you really didn't want to use that. There are tools for that are pretty good. Another one is Topaz Labs, Denoise AI, I think is what it's called. And it's on sale right now. It's cheap. It's like $79 or something. So take advantage of that if that's a concern. But that really can help. Does it always? No, there's exceptions. There's limits. But it is a fantastic tool when you are having to choose an ISO that's higher than you would normally have chosen. And there's some others out there that can help with that. And Topaz Labs has 2 or 3 that actually can help with this kind of thing. So I recommend those. So that is what I have brought to you guys today for low light photography. An hour and a half is not a long enough time to talk about everything there is to talk about. But we've covered quite a few. We've surface leveled some, but we've talked about quite a few different options on that side. So I want you guys to, picture yourself in a situation where you are photographing low light. And if you are thinking of something that you've come across or that you're mentally, you've got this thing where what do I do in this situation? This is the time to bring that up. So any questions or thoughts that you have on tools or procedures that you need to do, ask those now.
Now we got some questions coming in. Mike has one there, black and white with raw. Does an orange filter have a benefit in the raw file for black and white images?
If I'm using film, then yeah. If I'm doing digital, there's so many good tools to help me out with black and white that I don't have that need. Now, I also am not a specialist in black and white. So it's quite possible that there's a specialist in black and white that does see a reason for that kind of thing. So I don't know it, but it's possible.
And Don is chiming in there that he recently used Topaz and it works great. It's actually something I'm looking at too, but it's to kind of rescue uh images for artists who shot maybe like when digital photography first started, and they have all of this noise going on with the at the thing. Think at the time when everything came out was like 8 megapixels or something. So the first generation digital cameras. So I'm looking at Topaz to rescue some old art images. But yeah, that sounds like a great tool. There has been the Topaz.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a fantastic tool. It's all tools are just tools. They can only do what they can do. And so just it's the reason I'm only saying that someone in one of my other classes was talking about how they used this tool and it didn't really help them out very much. And they were kind of disappointed in the tool. It's not for every single use, just like a Phillips screwdriver is not for every single use. So just because it doesn't work in every situation does not mean it's not a good tool. And so those of you who try it, continue to try it, because in the ideal situation, when it's used for its main purpose, it's surprising how good a job it does. The older versions would actually kind of blur the image a little bit, and so you would have that problem, and you might actually have to take it through a sharpening tool. It's quite possible. Topaz Labs has a sharpening tool as well. I think it's called Sharpen AI. And they have a resizer tool as well. And there's several other companies that have resizer tools. And I know that FineArtWorks has used resizer tools in the past because of what you're talking about, Melissa, to help that photographer out to get their print. It has to go through something to upsize it in order for it to look good. Those tools have limitations as well.
Mm-hmm.
They have tremendously gotten better, though. It's freakishly amazing, because I have the ability to compare to the programs that didn't work so well, and so I think the ones today are amazing. If you don't have the ability to compare, you may not be as underwhelmed. You may be underwhelmed, whereas I'm pretty whelmed.
Yeah. What I've tried with some softwares is I'll pick like one image that I'm going to do, and then I know the effect I want, and then I try to hit the free trials on it. But before I even sign up for the free trials, I go through a bunch of tutorials because I don't want to spend the time trying to learn to make that what I'm trying to get done. Like I will specifically type in like reduce noise in Topaz or reduce noise in Photoshop or Lightroom, and try these different things. And I watch the videos, and I go ahead and get the trial, and I'll take the image in and try to, do that on each one and see what I get, which one works best for me, as far as it can't be too technical because I'm like a settings person. I really just like settings. I like something ready to set to go. But I used to have to work
You've
with
got
low
enough
light
things to work with.
photography. Yeah, I hate technical. It's more technical something gets, the more difficult and the more zoned out I get. But I used to work with film for low light photography because I would photograph bands in dive bars for music reviews in either Express News or a magazine. I'd have to go to these places where they have like no lighting system at all for the stage and get pictures of the bands in there. So everything I probably shot was probably in like a 400, or I think it was like was it 1200 ISOs film, and then develop and like I said back then, hand develop and shoot and get everything out. But there were times where I would love, like I said, and I think now more so than anything with wedding photography, um, people try to create an ambiance with lighting because now you hire lighting companies in with your weddings to give an ambiance in, and sometimes it's like the monogram of the couple on the dance floor on a wall that's there, and you want to capture all of that and still, like you said, light well the couple, and but get that ambiance in the background of the lighting. And I'm guessing then that becomes several aspects of the color balance on there, and and again setting up your f-stop and everything to capture everything perfectly. I mean, to me, those shots, when I look at them, when I see people have those kind of shots wedding photographers, I'm like, Oh, that's amazing. Because I just know so much went into getting that shot because of capturing background light and capturing the couple well, like I said, and just maybe enough motion in there on some of those dance shots. And like to me, like I said, those also to me have a nice artistic feel to them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Well, Jim, do you want to tell everybody what you're going to be talking about next month for our July, which I believe is July 1st is first Thursday, so it'll fall before the first Tuesday of the month. And you have a topic called titled The Magic Hour.
Yes, happy to talk about that. And real quick, Mike mentioned in the chat that he understands that Nick Silver Effects is supposed to be great too. I have heard good things about Nick Silver Effects for black and white. I have played with it once or twice, but I'm far from the expert there. I'm familiar with it. And yeah, it was a cool tool. So yeah, Nick Silver Effects. So next month on July 1st, Thursday, July 1st at 4 o'clock, we're going to be talking about the magic hour. And the magic hour, you may have heard people call it by different names. So you may have heard it called by golden hour or blue hour. Well, I don't call it either one of those because it is both. It is not just golden hour and it is not just blue hour. It is both golden and blue hour. It's both. And so I don't want to call it one because then I'm ignoring the other. So I call it the magic hour. And I'm not the only one that's called it that. I've heard lots of other people call it that too. But I choose to call it the magic hour. And it is the first or last hour of the day where the light is either coming in the morning or going out in the evening. So it's that last moment of that last hour or first hour of light during the day. And the lighting is amazing. And you guys know this. I'm preaching to the choir. You guys know the lighting during that time of the day can be amazing. This is when you've seen the beautiful sunrises, the beautiful sunsets. You've seen photographs of, romantic photographs of couples as the sun's going down, or weddings at sunset. There's probably not a whole lot of sunrise weddings. I don't think I would do that. But maybe you guys would. Some people are more inclined to do morning things, but having everybody there for a wedding in the morning, probably not. But sunset weddings, yeah, you hear about this kind of thing all the time. Maybe not as much in hotter areas or hotter months, but yeah, it's a beautiful time of day. So what do we need to do in order to get the correct exposure during these times? And what should we expect? And what should we be looking for, both in front of us, looking towards that beautiful sunset or sunrise, and behind us? What's happening as a result of these long shadows that are being created? A lot of the photographs that you can create that are amazing are by not looking at the beautiful subject, but by looking at other areas too. We'll be talking about those. So I welcome you and encourage you to put this on your calendar right now. This is July 1st, Thursday, July 1st at 4 p.m. Put that on your calendar, and I look forward to seeing you in a month.
Yeah. Anything coming up on Photo Essay that you want to share?
Yeah, you know what? Thank you for asking about that. So Photo Essay is our camera club. And one of our sponsors is Finer Works. And so the topic that we have coming up, and this is coming up soon, this is 1 week from today, and it's called Big Cats and Little Cats. And this is by a naturalist photographer who goes around the world. He has a ranch that's near Smithville, called Red Belly Ranch, and he has seminars and workshops there, but he also travels around the world. So you could go with him on a photo tour to Costa Rica or some other really cool place. And he has these events, these workshops, and he photographs different things. And he does some of them with a group, some of them he's on his own. But this particular series he did was on all the wild cats. So all 5 of the large cats, he's photographed them on, different continents. And so he goes and he does his thing, and he's going to share with us the tools that he uses, the thoughts and processes, the planning that he had to do in order to make this kind of thing happen, so that you can do it too if you have that kind of interest. But even those things that are on that big scale that maybe you don't feel like you'd ever do, there's still things that you can do on a local level just by going out of town a little bit and be able to apply the things that he's done so that you can create amazing wildlife photographs, on the level that Jack Smith creates. You guys know Jack Smith? He's an amazing wildlife photographer, and he happens to be with us here today. And so this photographer though is Jeff Parker, and he's going to be presenting big cats and little cats on Thursday next week at 6:30, and you can go to meetup.com, meetup.com/photo SA to get more information. So meetup.com/photo SA. If you're not a member already, just click on the join us. You get more information when you click on the join us. And that way you also get the emails to let you know what the next upcoming meeting is all about. We bring in speakers.
They're always really great, really knowledge. I mean, again, it's everything you're interested in is always a learning thing. You learn something all the time, so you always have to stay on top of programs that are, especially when they're available to you so easily. As Jim makes all of his stuff available. You had one question, and actually it was a good one. Nia has a question asking about how do you control the export DPI of photos to be able to produce large prints? I thought that was a great thing because, being at a printing place, I love go big or go home kind of thing. So,
Yeah. um, I think the guy that is best to answer that question is probably James. I don't know if he has his audio on, but I can see it. I can see his face in the screen right now. But
I'm sorry,
man,
what was the question? I didn't catch it.
about controlling the export of DPI on photographs to be able to produce larger prints. What are the considerations? What things does a photographer need to be thinking about or doing in order to maximize that quality?
Well, obviously, the first thing would be to make sure you're photographing you're taking a photograph at the highest setting. Okay, and not only at the highest setting, but you also want to make sure that you are photographing in a raw mode, so that your digital, we call them digital negatives sometimes, but so that they have the most information possible. Now, when you're going to send them to a lab to print, in all likelihood, you'll export them into like a JPEG or possibly a TIFF. But you always want to have that working copy, the copy that you're adjusting, that you're modifying. You want that to be a raw file, or you want that to be in an uncompressed format. This way, if you have to increase your image size, increase the resolution, we call it resampling. Since it's going to be creating pixels which weren't there, it'll have more data to do that with, so that it's going to become less blocky, less pixelated when you increase that size. I wouldn't increase the size if you're going to what we call resampling up or resizing up. I wouldn't do it much more than about maybe 25% of the original file. But keep in mind, if you're going to be printing professionally or with a professional printer, you ideally you want your image to be no less than 150 pixels per inch. So your image file, the way it was shot, should have at least 150 pixels across for every given inch that you want to print in width or height. You may be able to go lower, and it may be fine. You may be fine, and you may be okay with it. But our recommendation is that 150. Okay, so if you do, most labs, if you do have resampling software, so that if your files are not at that optimal resolution, they will increase that file size, or they will increase the dimensions, the file dimensions, to match whatever print processing software that they're using. This may mean that that resampling process occurs as I explained. But usually they're, companies like us, Digital Pro Lab, other, photo labs, online photo labs. Their software uses very advanced resizing algorithms, so you should be okay. But again, that's assuming your image is about 150 pixels per inch or higher. You don't need to go 600 pixels per inch. That's just a waste of pixels. So if you're submitting an image that's 600 pixels per inch, you're not going to see any benefits. You're just going to submit a file that's much larger than it needs to be, without the advantage of seeing an increase in clarity or sharpness in your prints. You won't see that. So did that kind of answer the question?
I think she did. She has, like Nia was saying, that her Lightroom defaults to the 72 DPI, which I'm thinking is a settings thing. I'm not a Lightroom user.
I
so
couldn't
anybody
find how to
Lightroom-
control it. Like I
Okay.
tell my art prints at
Yeah.
300
So
DPI.
one of the things you have to understand is that's a relative number. So the fact that it defaults to 72 is fine. JPEGs default to 72. So when you export a JPEG, it's always going to default to 72. That doesn't mean that you have to understand DPI is dots per inch. So or PPI, pixels per inch, is really what we're referring to. So it's relative to the physical size that you want. So if your image says 72 pixels per inch, then it may be 72 pixels per inch as a 16 by 20, but it's going to be what 70. So I can't do the math right off the top of my head, but if you were to do a smaller size, like maybe a 5x7, it's going to be closer to 300 pixels per inch.
Okay, got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
So don't get too worried about how it defaults to that. A lot of software programs do that, and that's just kind of the nature. That's by design.
All right. Well, guys, thanks again, everybody. Jim, thanks for everybody doing this again. We'll see everybody Thursday, July 1st at 4 o'clock for the magic hour. And if you have any other questions, just put them in the comments on YouTube. If you can, subscribe to the channel and hit notify so you'll know whenever we put up new videos, or again, that way we can respond to your questions on there quickly. Thanks again. And just to throw this out, Jim, to your photo community out there, if there's anybody who is a selling photographer for booth sales, for our first Tuesday in July, we're going to be talking about booth sales and selling techniques that we want to share with everybody, especially now as we're getting more of the in-person events back in here. So if there's anybody who would want to share their experience at booth sales for photography, please contact me at melissa@finerworks.com. And I'd love to have you guys on Tuesday to help other photographers who are looking at doing booth sales. All right. So with that, Jim, anything else you'd like to close with?
Oh, that's good. Thank you guys all for being here today and taking your time from doing something else. We appreciate you being here with us and contributing to the uplifting of the creative community. Thank you guys, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah. All right, Jim, we'll let you end the meeting.
All right.
All right.
Let's
Bye.
see.
Bye.